when I felt I needed to write a book was when my life changed. And then I
Mm-hmm.
spent the next year and a half really working on myself. And also, it was difficult emotionally, very difficult, because it wasn't reopening the wounds, it was more than that. It was dissecting the wounds. And finally, October 2021, I was at a bottom. I was spending all my time alone, wallowing on my misery, over drinking, like minimum 2 bottles of wine for 2 years straight a day is what society asks. It's like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm broken.
Yeah.
Like, why don't I feel these beautiful emotions? Why can I not have friends or, thrive in an intimate relationship? Well, I have a formula that I explain
Okay.
in the book, and it's not something I thought about consciously. It's just the way it happened. Um,
Hmm.
so the first step, it didn't, because you wanted to avoid confrontation or whatever, but the grudge is still there, and it will come out in some sort of discussion in a month, a year, or 2 years. It will come out again because you never healed it. If they're feeling that life is not worth living right now, I want them to know that it is, that there is a greater meaning to our experiences, and that we have the power to turn anything that happened to us into a beautiful gift and lesson for ourselves and for others.
Welcome to Masters Decoded Season 4.
What was your wake-up call? What got you to all of this?
Honestly,
How do you overcome self-doubt?
so first and foremost,
How do you do that emotional quotient? How do you bring that up? My next guest on today's podcast is Melissa Osorio. Melissa is an author of her famous book and a recent book called Hidden Memory. Melissa has some amazing perspectives about child trauma and her own journey of self-realization of trauma in her life and how it shaped her and how did she overcome and the benefit of plant medicines which helped her along the way. So if you wanting to learn more about child trauma and how traumas in life can have an impact to our lives, then you should not miss this show. So without much further ado, let me get on with it. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to Masters Decoded Season 4 podcast. Really glad to have you on the show today.
Hi, so good to be here. Thank you.
Likewise, Melissa. And it's been almost now 5 months since the time we met in person. And it's really glad to have this conversation. And I have heard your story in person when we were in Tallinn together. We'll talk more about those stories. But I think the first order of today's conversation is the book, Hidden Memory. So congratulations. At that time, you were talking about your book in September and you released it at the end of last year. How's the book been for you? How's the experience of writing a book and having your own stories out in public feel like?
Yeah, it's been, writing the book, the whole process, putting the book out, it's been a beautiful gift. First for myself, because it's not often that we get to actually sit down and take account of our life, from even our parents' life and before our grandparents' life. So that was a beautiful healing journey. But then to be able, and I actually have the book here, to be able to, to put these in the hands of readers and to share this story in a way that is meaningful and that is impactful to them, and then hearing their feedback, hearing their opinions, telling me about their lives, about their struggles, and telling me how the book was able to help them. That has been the real gift for me of writing this book, for sure.
I was telling you before we started recording, I have also have a now concept of a book which I definitely would want to invest my time and energy behind. But it's a lot and it's a big undertaking also. And especially for you, I know the stories. I have read the book a little bit. I have not yet completed, I'll be very open, but I have read it. It's a very powerful piece. And you mentioned about healing. When you're writing it, or when you're kind of recollecting all of that, how was the entire emotional state when you were doing this for yourself and for others?
Well, my book writing process was actually quite interesting, very uncommon way to write a book. So uh, when I felt I needed to write a book was when my life changed. And then I
Mm-hmm.
spent the next year and a half really working on myself, reading all the books that I could find to try to survive, to help me, and traveling to many different places around the world to learn more about what was helping me, learning about the science of what I was going through. And then at some point during that year and a half, I realized that my story is really not that unique. I'm not very special about what happened to me. Is something that happens all the time to many people. So to be able to actually uh, take that year and a half that I thought initially was for me and my own survival, and then when I finally decided it was time to write the book, I said to myself, okay, tomorrow I wake up at 7 a.m. I'm going to take a cold shower and I'm going to sit down in my computer. It was quite intimidating because I had never even kept a journal. I had never written anything.
Hmm.
I knew I could write
Wow.
because I wrote one good paper in college. And I was like, oh, okay, I can
Okay.
reference that one paper that was really good.
Y-
Um, but, when I actually sat down and started to write the book, it was really magical. I realized very fast that the year and a half was not just for me. I was literally researching what was going to go in that book to make it impactful for people. So when I sat down and I started to write, it just poured out of me. I actually wrote this storyline, which is 50,000 words, in 12
Wow.
hour days. So it was very fast.
Wow. You've shared few things, and I want to double click on many of them right now. But how many days it took you? 12 hours? Like, was it a month or more than that?
12 consecutive days. So it
Oh,
was
wow.
12 hour days of like
Wow.
incredible moment of my life. I remember sitting in bed and I was vibrating for the entire time. I could barely sleep, and I remember sitting in bed and honestly being in awe of the way that I was able to express myself on the page. I was so grateful, and I was just very grateful for guidance, for the love I have received. And I just remember sitting on my bed and telling to myself, anchor this moment, how you're feeling right now, this fullness of your heart, this trust. So yeah, it was a really magical time. And also it was difficult emotionally,
Hmm.
very difficult, because it wasn't reopening the wounds. It was more than that. It was dissecting the wounds, analyzing, everything in a very deep level and extracting all the things that I thought could be helpful for other people. Because, telling my story
Hmm.
is one thing, but being able to say it and tell it in a way that resonates with people, regardless of their experience, that's where I find the
Yep.
value of sharing the book.
Something changed for you, and that prompted you to go on a 18-month to 24-month exploration, understanding what's happening. You went through different books, you went through different healing processes. What was that moment? What happened?
Yeah, so my life had been spiraling down massively, like 2020, 2021. And finally, October 2021, I was at a bottom. I was spending all my time alone, wallowing on my misery, over drinking, like minimum 2 bottles of wine for 2 years straight a day.
Wow.
So it was just, I was numbing my pain. I was desperate to try to self regulate, which is really what addictions are, right? It's our desperate attempt
Yep.
to self regulate. So finally, on one particular day, I just got to a point that I explained, the little incident that pushed me had to do with my dogs, which is interesting. But I just said, okay, I cannot continue going down this path. I know it's not rock bottom, but I'm pretty close. And I didn't like where I was going. I didn't like how I was feeling. So I had heard some of my friends that I trusted had told me about
Hmm.
a place they went to in Costa Rica where they went to heal their hearts. And to be
Hmm.
honest, I was heartbroken at the moment, and I just thought, okay, this is probably a good place to start. So I went
Okay.
down to Costa Rica to do something that it was very much out of my comfort zone for
Hmm.
various reasons. I grew up in a very religious family, so anything that was unexplainable or extraordinary. It was deemed bad or demonic. So, I was very careful about what I did in my life around those subjects. But I trusted my God and my friends' opinions, and I went down to Costa Rica and I drank a plant medicine called ayahuasca.
How was the experience? And I'll tell
Well,
you
it
why,
was
because
it was
I recently also attended a ceremony, and it's been life changing for me as well. So I would like to hear your story and your
Yeah,
aspect.
so a lot of people know what ayahuasca is, but if I may, I'll just talk a
Yeah,
little bit about it for those that don't know. So ayahuasca is a plant. It's a plant medicine.
yeah,
So it has been used for medicinal purposes, especially for mental health purposes, around the world for millennia, especially in native tribes of South and Central America. So what makes ayahuasca unique is that it decreases the fear in your brain by decreasing the activity in the amygdala, which is a fear center, and then increases the connection between your rational brain and your memory center. So it
yeah.
creates a better relation between those two. So it's needless to say, I went to Costa Rica to do more than heal my heart. I went to heal my mind. I went to heal my body. I went to heal my soul, to be honest. So on my third ayahuasca ceremony, my life unraveled. It was it's gonna be difficult to have to think to have a more like a more challenging night in my life than that night. Never say never, but it was truly heart wrenching. Like my life
Hmm.
imploded and exploded in an instant. In an instant. However, with that, it also gave me the chance, after an absolute destruction of my belief system, my values, my feelings, my past, my present, my future, everything I have worked for, after all of that crumble in front of my eyes because of what was coming up in this ceremony, then I was free to
Hmm.
reveal my life, to rebuild it with a different foundation, with compassion,
Hmm.
with kindness, with understanding, with grace, with wisdom, like to just become who I was always meant to be, regardless of if nothing bad will have happened to me during my childhood, let's say.
Now I was listening to a podcast by Jay Shetty with Kevin Hart, and they were talking about there are many things which hold us back, and there are a lot of these childhood memories or traumas. I would also use that word, which hold us back. And I have heard your story, and you've shared this story with on multiple platforms as well, not just on the forum which we were in, but I have seen you or heard you sharing that story with many others as well, where you almost took your life as a child, where you took a bicycle and you almost jumped into an open swimming pool, right? And that changed you. And those feelings came back to you. Correct me if I'm wrong. In that ayahuasca, that entire story came back to you.
Yeah, correct. So, what happened on that third ayahuasca treatment is that because of the decreasing activity of the fear and the increased activity between my memory and my rational brain, I started to unlock doors in my mind that were previously very locked. And those
Yep.
doors hid memories of a very traumatic childhood. So, I didn't really remember my childhood very much, only small snippets of information from the first 16 years of my life. And I never questioned it. It was like, we talked about it. That's odd, but we never really talked more
Yeah.
about it. And then, as so many people, I assume I must have had a happy childhood because if something bad had happened, I will remember it. As it turns out, it's the
Yep.
complete opposite. If something bad happened, like really bad, especially if you were young, your brain will protect you because the brain's main function is survival. So the brain will make
Yep.
sure it locks anything that feels like death to preserve your
Yeah.
life. So the first memory that I started to recover was of that incident in the pool. I had three little snippets of memory. I remember me riding around the pool. I remember standing up at the bottom and, feeling the blood kind of like dripping. I remember being in the hospital and the doctors telling my parents they didn't know how I was alive. But I didn't have the dots, like the dots were not connected. So what ayahuasca did for me, that first memory, is it connected the dots and it showed me the full story. So it was very shocking because there I was, 8 years old, riding my brother's bicycle, choosing to not almost jump, but actually did jump headfirst into an empty pool because I wanted to die. That's how desperate I was. So that prompted a very difficult questions for us humans to answer. It's very involved, and it's a
Yeah.
question: why? Why did I
Yeah.
want to die? So then, of course, more and more memories unravel that answer that question.
Are you comfortable sharing why on this platform?
Yes, I mean, we can share it. I feel like if I share all of the story, then there is no mystery for the book. So, but I will.
No, Vivek, I have heard this story in person, and I'm sure the listeners, it's like you're leaving them on the edge. But let's leave them on the edge. I would
Well,
not
let's
want
see.
to
I'll
reveal
dance around. So I might just jump right
Sure.
in because it's hard to dance around. But my entire life, I struggle with feelings of disconnection, not really wanting to make friends, not feeling comfortable around people. I will look at
Hmm.
my hand and wonder if I even loved 5 people in my life. I didn't know how love felt, like how the emotion felt. I question if I even love my own mother. That's how
Wow.
disconnected I was. And of course, when you feel that disconnection, the natural inclination, because it's what the doctors ask, is what society asks, is like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm broken.
Yeah.
Like, why don't I feel these beautiful emotions? Why can I not have friends or thrive in an intimate relationship? And the question that is much better to ask is, what happened to me? Like, what happened to me? Because every emotion, pattern, and behavior that we display has a root cause, whether it's
Yep.
ancestral because we get it from our parents and their traumas, or because something happened to us. But what we do as humans is we just accept how we are blindly. Like our identity,
Mm.
we just accept it. If we are angry all the time, I'm just angry. I'm an angry person. We don't question
Yeah.
the things that we do that really are not easy to explain. So, like, to be able to question those behaviors and starting to see patterns within myself, especially in romantic relationships. I mean, I was attracting the same kind of guy and I was acting the same
Mm.
way and they were acting the same way. If it happened once, I can blame the guy. But if it
Yeah.
happened like twice or 3 times and they're acting the same way, I'm the one that is, you know, allowing them to act that way. So what's going on with me that I'm okay with that behavior? So that was the first time I actually questioned me. I said, okay, one guy,
Hmm.
I will get, like, it's the guy's problem, but 2 guys is too much. Like, I have to look at myself, not at them
Yeah.
anymore. So that's what prompted me to, initially go to rhythmia. So I was not thinking there was any hidden trauma, like, at all. This was a total surprise for me.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, so Melissa, this is so profound, right? Where you experience this revelation, I would use a word, which helped you to uncover why your behaviors were the way you were acting in larger society and with close and near and dear ones. But when you realize that and you would want to share it and you shared it in a book format, how were the close ones around you? I'm sure they had never thought about something like this was going through during your childhood, why you were behaving in a way. So what was that experience? What was that acceptance? Or how did the your mother or your brother and everybody else took that story which
Yeah,
you
well,
shared?
I think I'll just mention briefly what the memories were about, because it's quite shocking for many people when they hear the duration of the memory lapse and what they
Hmm.
were. Because sometimes people think, oh, yeah, maybe bullied by a brother or a sister or like whatnot. But so it was 13 years of very severe childhood sexual abuse that I experienced. And it was 13 years of my life I couldn't remember. And it was 13
Hmm.
years that I was living with my family. And, the abuse, it was from one of my family members who
Yeah.
was my best friend, the only person I confided in, like the only person I needed in my life. So you're right. When I started to recover these memories, they were the moment they started, every cell in my body carried the weight of remembrance. I knew
Hmm.
the whole story. Even before I completely remember everything, I knew everything. My brain was in shock. So for a while, for a couple of hours, I really struggled mentally. I lost my everything. Like I was screaming and crying and punching, and it was a very difficult moment. But I knew they were true. So when I went home
Yeah.
and I talked to my family about them, I still didn't know how they were true because we were not educated on mental health. So we didn't
Yeah.
know that the brain can hide years of your life, traumatic experiences for your survival. I had never read such books, even though I went to the university and I had a couple of, psychology classes. It was just never a thing. So when I spoke with my family, at first they were in shock, but then they started to process it, and in their minds and hearts it also made sense because it explained a lot of behaviors within myself, within my middle sister especially, behaviors that before we couldn't explain but we never questioned. When you add the
Hmm.
reason why, then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, how did I not see this before? Right? It's like right in front of your face, but you're not thinking that way. So you miss it. And that, I'm very grateful because my family's support has been invaluable,
Yeah.
unconditional. So it's been a beautiful healing journey, not only for me, but actually for my family as a whole. We've come together as a closer family unit now.
No, it's you're very lucky to have an amazing family, and you went on an expedition to learn more about this. Like, are you the only one who's had this, and you had experience that there are many others? And the reason why you have the book out is to have that small girl child somewhere sitting, probably have that courage to share that there's something like this happening to them. But I want to talk about those 18 months. Where all did you go? What all did you experience when you went on to that self realization or that expedition to learn more and understand more?
Yeah, so I enter a tunnel in Costa Rica of self discovery and mental health with my first ayahuasca treatments. And in
Yeah.
that tunnel, I felt like there was a tornado. And it was a
Wow.
very difficult place to be in, but I knew I needed to get through the tunnel. I couldn't stay in the
Hmm.
tunnel because I will be stuck in a place that was worse than before. So I want
Hmm.
to segue and say that's one of the things that is very important for people to consider before doing any plant medicine. Ideally, they want to be in a place where they can change their lives if necessary, depending of what comes up in the plant medicine. It's not something that
Yeah.
you just go and do on a weekend just for to check it out, because if
Leisure.
some stuff
Yeah.
do come up and you have no mental energy, emotional energy, time to make changes, then you can get stuck in places that are unhealthy. In my case, I was very blessed because I was able to basically pause my life in every aspect. So when I left Costa Rica, after drinking ayahuasca, after starting to recover my memories, I researched other centers that served other medicines, other plant medicines. And I went to Ecuador, to a beautiful center in Ecuador as well. I mentioned it in the book, where I connected with nature. I just wanted to be in nature. I wanted to
Hmm.
disconnect from all the normal life stuff. So in the mountains, drinking these different substances that act similarly but with different effects. So some of them are more
Yeah.
mild, others are more hallucinogenic. So they're all different. But I went on research mode. I have a very scientific mind, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna see what this one can help me with, and then this one, and
Hmm.
and I was very blessed because I went to places that really helped me with care, which is not always a case. That's why people also have to be very careful with plant medicine, like the set and the
Yeah.
setting where you go, who you're with, is so important. And then after that,
Agreed.
I went on different retreats. I sat with different medicine people and basically just went on an introspection that kept on going deeper and deeper and deeper and more painful and more painful and more painful. But at the same time, there was pain, but there was healing. There was pain, but there was healing. So, yeah, so for a year and a half, almost, I lived in retreats in different parts, probably about 12 out of 15 months. So it
Wow.
was it was an intense time where I organized my mind, but also my body, just kind of like got organized, because we store trauma not only in our brain or in our heart. We store it in every cell, everywhere in our body. And the beauty of what has happened to me and that I want to share with people is that we're not disconnected on here. The current medical models, they disconnect mental health from body. We're completely connected. We're one unit. So when I started to
Hmm.
clear the trauma in my mind and to organize my thoughts and to, just think more beautifully about life and more forgiving with myself and more compassionate, basically to love myself for the very first time, my body just started to get healthy. Like I
Yeah.
literally had a layer of fat that came off without me working out or
Wow.
doing anything differently. It was all that fat or those cells that were holding on to trauma that oftentimes are the cells and the tissues that cause cancer, autoimmune diseases. So there is a huge connection between unhealed trauma and illnesses, serious illnesses that end up killing a person.
No, it is so true, and I have seen and experienced this myself personally, and I have seen few people around me where and it's medically proven that cancerous cells are there in everybody's body. They get aggravated, they get activated when you go through a moment of stress, or there are certain life-changing moments in life, not in a medical or a health-wise, but more mind and heart point of view, like whether you've had a breakup or you've had some serious mental issues, and that aggravates these cancerous cells. And it's cancer in a way is good for body, because what body is trying to do is it's trying to protect you, and that's what cancer cells do, right? And it's been medically proven. So cancer is not good for body in a way that it kills you, but it basically it's a reaction of a body that, hey, something is wrong, let me put that shield up, and unfortunately
Yeah.
it puts up the cancer shield, right?
Absolutely. And, this might sound a little extreme, but I am absolutely sure that if I wouldn't have gone down to Costa Rica and drank that plant medicine and started to do the work, because it's not only drinking the plant medicine but doing the work when you
Yeah.
get home every day in, day out, changing yourself, changing your life, standing up when you don't want to. If I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be alive today, for a couple of reasons. Number one, my mind was not where it needed to be for a person to have a healthy life. And two, my body was very unhealthy. Even though I looked fine
Hmm.
on the outside, inside, I was not well. I was having trouble breathing. I was having strange pains. So definitely the cleansing of the trauma cleansed my body as well, for sure. And that is a message that is so important for people to understand. Because sometimes people struggle, they work out, they eat right, and they're still holding on to that stubborn fat. And I'm not saying, hey, heal your trauma, lose your fat without any effort, but I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
so helpful to get your will to live by clearing what's painful in your mind, and then your body is like, okay, let's do this. Let's get aligned with this
Yeah.
beautiful new mind that is there.
Yeah, and it's you. You also mentioned that you started loving your body, and the body loves you back in many ways, right? It tells you, "Hey, since you started appreciating me, you're giving me the right fuel, you're giving me the right mindset. I'll love you back." And it starts pulling out, and I have seen it personally as well. I, like you said, I have had a lot of, for last decade, I've had a lot of processes and different diets and exercises trying to lose weight. I have not been able to do that, but in the last 6 months I've been able to do that successfully, because not only I've been able to heal my wounds, but also able to heal a lot of things in life, which helps me, and more importantly, love my body, and the body's loving me back. So
Yeah.
that's a big moral.
And that's so beautiful. I'm so proud of you for, for making the necessary changes. It requires effort, it requires
Yep.
work, but it's incredibly rewarding to be able
Yep.
to do it for yourself. And then, as you know, the people around you, they also start noticing. So it's that beautiful ripple effect that we're trying to
Yep.
create, right? Like it's not just like, oh, okay, yeah, Melissa wrote a book and this many people bought it and read it. It's really, if it's impactful enough, then the people that bought it and read it or listened to it, they will share it with other people and they will share with other people. So what we're creating is a ripple effect. Like in my book, I mentioned that the world is being taken over by an avalanche of trauma. It really is.
Yep.
Like the trauma that our parents didn't heal gets, repeated with us. And if we don't heal it, we repeat it with our kids and them with their grandkids until a generation comes that says, no more. Like, this is not the
Yep.
way I want to live my life. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say my truth. I'm going to work on myself. And then the beauty of it, the gift, is that the people around you start noticing and they start improving and they start changing. And the ones that don't want to
Agree.
improve and the ones that don't want to change, they live your life. And that's okay. Like once you
Yeah.
decide you want better, there's this beautiful saying that once you decide you want better for yourself, the universe conspires so that can happen.
Yep. Yeah. There's a famous Hindi quote. I will not go through that, but it's the same piece, right? It says, I'll translate it in English, like, if you want something, and you want it with a whole heart and soul, then the entire universe will align to it and will ensure that it happens for you, right? Basically, that's what the entire saying is. But just flipping this a little bit on the other side, right? Now, you've been through this journey of healing, and you've been through this journey of identifying your trauma areas, and each one of us go through that. Unfortunately, people believe that, hey, even the people who've had a wonderful childhood, they've had some traumas, right? There are certain things which hold us back. uh, some people realize it, some people don't realize it, and especially childhood trauma, and more importantly childhood abuse, is a big piece which people don't openly speak. Do you think that's changing now, Melissa? Meaning, do you see the world is openly talking about it, or there's still taboo around it?
There is still taboo around mental health. There is stigma around trauma. There is shame surrounding vulnerability and authenticity, especially for both men and women, but especially with men. Men
Yep.
are even more shut down by society standards of what's masculine and what's not. So it's
Yep.
changing, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I hope one of the things that the book can do is to be a beacon that helps
Yeah.
remove some of that stigma, helps remove some of that shame. In one of the chapters, I mentioned how there is millions of people right now living in a fog of trauma they cannot remember because their brain
Hmm.
hid it from them for their own survival, but they're struggling. They don't know why they cannot be happy. So, I make the comparison. They ask the weatherman for the weather forecast, and the weatherman says it's sunny, it's warm and beautiful. But to them, it's not sunny, it's not warm, it's
Yeah.
not beautiful. So they feel broken. And they catch glimpses of the sun when they get married, when they get a baby, when they get a puppy, but they're fleeting, and that becomes enough for them. That becomes what
Hmm.
makes their life, what life is about. And then what happens is they go right to their last days, right to their grave, never knowing what that fog of trauma was always above their heads. And we're trying to
Yeah.
change that. Like the message that I'm trying to put out is for people to question their behaviors, their emotions, to question themselves. So if there is a fog of unremembered trauma or even remembered trauma, that they can remove it. They can remove it and they can live fuller lives.
And plant medicine is one of the routes. There are many more other routes as well, like meditation and mindfulness practices. I'm sure you've experienced them as well, and you've been through multiples of them. You've almost put your body to a laboratory. I almost believe, right, where you've experimented with a lot of these. But do you think only plant medicine is the right route, or when I say meditation and a lot of these other practices can also help you, like breath work also
Mhm.
can unravel many other things? So do you think there are other mediums too?
Oh, 100%. In fact, this book is not about pushing people to do psychedelics. That's not the
Yes.
purpose. The book is to create awareness so people can pursue whatever avenue feels right to them to help
Yeah.
themselves. So I mentioned some other avenues here for those people that are just not interested in psychedelics or for health reasons they cannot do it. Breath work is an incredible tool. We all have it. It's our breath. It's free. So, breath work, yoga, meditation, all the mindfulness practices. And by the way, even when you do psychedelics, when you go home, you still have to do all the other stuff. You still have to do the breath
Yeah.
work and you have to do the mindfulness practices, because if not, it's you open the wound and then you never pat it or clean it in the following days. It's just gonna, close again and become infected again. So all of those things are important. And I actually wanted to mention something that I think is really meaningful for people to understand, because sometimes people compare their traumas to mine and they say your trauma was
Hmm.
bigger, mine was just, you know my mom beat me up, when I was a kid, or
Yeah.
my brother was a bully with me, or whatever. But they compare it to my trauma and somehow they diminish theirs. I don't want the
Yeah.
reader to do that. I go out of my way to make sure they don't do that, because the way I explain it, trauma, if our life is a cup of water, and I have my cup of water of my life and you have yours, and my trauma is yellow dye and your trauma is blue dye, it doesn't matter that they're different color dyes. When we put a drop in each of our cups, the entire substance will turn the color of the dye. So what that means is your trauma filled up your space as a child or as a teenager, all that you had in the trauma, trunk that needed to be filled.
Yeah.
It filled it up for you, and the experiences you had affected you similarly to how my experiences affected me. The nature of the trauma is not important. The perceived
Yeah.
severity of the trauma is not important. The only thing that's important is how it affected you, and if you process it or didn't process it, because then it will linger. The consequences will linger in your life.
No, it's so beautifully said right now that we should not start comparing traumas and saying this one is bigger, or mine was still okay or small, I can live through it. No, traumas are trauma at the end of the day, right? And you need to uh, come to terms with it. But just talking about comparison, but then there is realization of the trauma, and then you accepting it, and either going on a forgiving path or accepting
Hmm.
path, right?
Yeah.
Forgiving the person or accepting it that it has happened to you. Now you realize it and you move on, right?
Well, my theory
people
actually.
don't people don't accept and forgive or move on.
Mhm.
When I say move on, they kind of held it still back, right? So what's been your experience or thought around letting it go?
Well, I have a formula that I explain
Okay.
in the book, and it's not something I thought about consciously. It's just the way it happened. Um,
Hmm.
so the first step is, when you have to face trauma, you almost go through the 5 stages of grief, right? So you will go
Hmm.
denial, you will go anger, you will go bargaining, then you'll go depression, and finally acceptance. So,
Hmm.
in my opinion, it's valid to go through all those stages, and it's valid for you to take as long as you need. However, the quicker you get to acceptance, the faster
Yeah.
you can start to heal. You can get stuck for years in denial or in anger, or in bargaining, well, it happened because I did that, or it didn't happen because he did, or you can go to acceptance at some point. Once you accept, then healing can start. I remember, in Costa Rica, after I went through those 5 stages of grief really fast during that ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony, I went to denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and I was stuck there for about 2 hours, which is really accelerated. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of plant medicine, that maybe outside of plant medicine, that process will have taken me a couple of years. But over there, I was
Yeah.
able to push through, and within 2 hours, I was able to reach the final stage, acceptance. And acceptance
Hmm.
didn't mean that I forgave or that I was okay with what happened. It just allowed me to start processing it so I could move forward. And that's the key. And another point I make in the book, in the very last chapter, actually, I wait until the very last chapter to make that point. I say that many people, experts included, they say that you have to forgive in order to
Yeah.
heal. And they say you should forgive first and then you can start healing. And I completely disagree with that. When you forgive pain and actions without processing them, you're actually bypassing the lesson and you're bypassing the
Hmm.
healing. You're forgiving too quickly as escape mechanism. Like someone hurts you really bad and you're like, I don't care, I forgive you. You probably held a grudge there. If it was something that
Yeah.
really hurt you, you held a grudge, but you pretended it didn't because you wanted to avoid confrontation or whatever. But the grudge is still there and it will come out in some sort of discussion in a month, a year, or 2 years. It will come out again because you never healed it. So in the last chapter of my book, I talk about how it took me a year and a half to forgive what had happened to me, to forgive the
Hmm.
person that betrayed me in the deepest of levels. And I was only able to forgive him after I processed my grief, after I sat with it, after I accepted what happened to me, what I survived, and the consequences
Hmm.
of it, and how they have been hurting me in my life. After I did that, then I was able to forgive. And the forgiveness does not mean that I am okay with what happened, or, that, whatever perpetrator had no responsibility. I forgave because, and I say it in the book, I have earned a life free of resentment, anger, and bitterness. And that is like one of
Yeah.
the beautiful goals, that when someone reads the book and gets to the end, that the book is at all times working as a mirror, reflecting back to the people their own lives, the people that they have to forgive, the ones that hurt them the most, that when they get to that last chapter, they look at forgiveness differently. They look at forgiveness as a gift to themselves, not as an
Yeah.
excuse for whoever did whatever to them, but forgiveness is a gift to the forgiver, more than anything, because you are the one that will reap the benefits.
No, and hopefully people realize that, like the statement which you made, right? Just forgiving and moving ahead is not the right step. It's you have to forgive it in all true sense and accept it and process it before you go ahead and say, yeah, yeah. And today it's easy in this today's day and age. Oh, I forgive that person, right? Like what you said, but they have really not processed it, and that comes out, and I have seen it coming out in front of many people. But just flipping on this further, right? What's your message to the small child, uh, boy or girl, right, who's going through that process? Uh, what's your message to them right now, that where they are at? Not to the grown-ups like us, but to a small child.
Well, I think the message is even for the grown-ups, because we all carry that little child inside of us our entire life. So whether
Yeah.
our inner child suffers something and we're now adults, or there is a child that's suffering something similar and they're still in the middle of it in their childhood, the message is still the same. Um, you know, I mentioned in the book that I wish, like, sometimes I have this vision of me 5 years old twirling under a mandarin tree, free and smiling, innocent. And I wish I could tell her everything is going to work out. Be strong. And the other part of
Hmm.
me feels that somehow I crossed the space and time barrier. And on that day, as I twirled, my heart got that message. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to be strong and survive, is because I believe we can give messages to our past selves and our future selves. Um, so
Yep.
I will say to the adult that has struggled with something in the past, number one, it's a cliche, but it's real. It's never too late. That little child
Hmm.
can be terrified inside, it can be angry, it can be depressed. And just by acknowledging the part of you that is still a little child, that is angry, that's depressed, you're healing your adult self. And to the children in the world going through sexual abuse right now, neglect, verbal abuse, physical abuse. All these things are so common. It's so common, it's
Yep.
distressing. I will
Yep.
say, my message from my book and from my heart for the reader is for that child to keep on going. You know, if they're feeling that life is not worth living right now, I want them to know that it is, that there is a greater meaning to our experiences, and that we have the power to turn anything that happened to us into a beautiful gift and lesson for ourselves and for others.
Melissa, this experience of yours has definitely taught you a lot. But I see that uh, also today the experiences you share, the experiences you go through, and talking about an experience, I want to switch this conversation to you too. You were fortunate enough to be not once but many times on the stage with you too. So, do you want to share how did that happen, and how was that entire experience by being with
Yeah,
Bono on the stage?
actually, I have one chapter where I talk about the power of music, or the
Yeah.
power of whatever elixirs we choose to have in our lives that just kind of keep us
Mhm.
going, give us energy, help us connect with our essence. So in my teenage years, I was fortunate enough to really get obsessed with the band U2, the Irish
Yeah.
singers, and um, I went to the first concert I went to was a U2 concert, and I remember it was the happiest I had ever felt in my entire life. I was
Hmm.
19 years old. So it became a lifeline. It became their
Hmm.
music, their tours kept me going. They kept me alive because even when life was hard, I will think of like, oh man, in 2 years, U2 is gonna tour. I need to start planning for that. It will give me hope. So, needless to say, I'm super enthusiastic when I'm in a U2 concert. So, I'm
Yes.
like always jumping and singing and definitely being acting like a crazy lady within restraints. So, yeah, so I think, these singers and players, they feed off the energy of the audience. So,
Yep.
yeah, so in one particular occasion, Bono pulled me up on stage, and I did nothing. I was so shocked. I was just like the entire time. But then
Okay.
I went away, and I thought to myself, okay, next time if I have an opportunity for that to happen again, I will do something unique. And without realizing, I was actually manifesting a dream that became true.
Hmm.
So, I was living in England at the time. I passed by a shop. There were a pair of jeans that I really like, but they didn't fit. So I bought them anyway, and I said, when Bono pulls me up on stage again, I'm going to be wearing these jeans. Sure enough, they
Nice.
announced a tour about a year later, and I
Hmm.
packed my jeans. They still didn't fit. They were about two sizes too small. And the tour was in Australia. So I went all
Wow.
the way to Australia, and I had five tickets for five shows. So I tried the jeans
Wow.
on for the first one, the second one, the third one, they didn't fit. But by the time the fourth show came around, I had already been watching shows for about a week. And you line up, you sleep on this in that day and age, you sleep on the street, you
Yep.
barely eat. So by the time of the fourth show, the jeans actually fit. I was able to get in them. And sure enough, that was the show that Bono pulled me up on stage again. And it's a cute story because to tie it in with trauma, it's not only that my mind was full of drawers that were closed. My
Yeah.
body was in chains because of my trauma. I didn't realize it, but I was not free. I couldn't move freely. I couldn't express freely. I had like a lock on my throat. I couldn't dance. I was just so self conscious and so stiff. So
Yeah.
what happened is when Bono pulled me up on stage, he always made the women dance. And I didn't feel comfortable dancing, so I just said, "Hey Bono, don't make me dance, please." And he didn't know what to
Hmm.
do, but I was pretty tall, so he basically just jumped in my arms like a baby. So I did do something unique. I was carrying Bono, like a baby in my arms. So that was really cute.
Yeah. And you recently also went to the Spear, and you were fortunate enough to be there with him again. So, no, the reason why I bring that music, because music for me and for everyone, I'm sure listening, is an elixir or a path to kind of sometimes disconnect and get away from our daily worries. And it helps, whatever music you listen to, it helps us ignite and helps us, by the way, my playlist has changed after the plant medicine. It's all unicorn kind of music these
I
days. So for
know.
me as well, because
I know, mine
so
too. Like, yeah, yeah.
my coach who had shared with me, he said, after the plant medicine, I would love to know what your playlist was. And I was like, yeah, it's completely changed these days. That music resonates more with me. But going back to the book, Melissa, now I'm sure a lot of readers have come to you and said, hey, this really touched me. It made me realize my traumas and all of that, right? uh, how's that experience for you, where as an author, you've touched so many lives and you continue to touch so many lives, and you want to go on? And there was a beautiful article by Los Angeles Tribune also, and there are a few other articles which I picked up, that something, your story should be converted into a movie or a series. How's, you know this, I would say, love which you're getting in through this medium, which is the book. uh, how's it been for you?
Well, it's been the most beautiful part of it. Actually, I thought writing it was gonna be the most beautiful gift, but it's actually hearing the feedback has become the most beautiful
Hmm.
gift. And more than hearing the feedback, several people have actually reached out to me and told me that this opened the door to understanding some of their patterns and behaviors, and they actually, through different means, plant medicine or actually NLP or tapping therapy, they started to recover hidden memories. And in several of the
Hmm.
cases, the memories involved a family member who was alive, which is different than in my case. My father is dead,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't kind of like have the conversation, but their family members were alive and they confronted them with the situation, and they got
Wow.
some closure in the sense that you know the people confessed. Hidden memories are
Hmm.
real, like, so
Yeah.
when you, especially when you have a person that hurt you and is alive and you go to them and there is a confession, there is that, oh my gosh, wow, this is real.
Yeah.
So when they tell me, hey, my life has changed so much, one of the persons that contacted me without me telling him anything said, like, my body has changed. I'm like, I've never been this skinny, this ripped. So just a beautiful opportunity that it has given me to listen to these stories. And I always invite anyone, the people watching the podcast, anyone that reads the book, please send me a message. Please reach out if you have any questions. If you want to share anything about yourself or your journey, because it's so rewarding, to be able
Yeah.
to be there beyond the book.
Yeah. Now, Melissa, the hidden memories are true, and your book title is so apt, Hidden Memories. And on that note, I will definitely leave in our show notes, and our team will leave that a link to your book. And if people have not read it, or even the audible version is so powerful. I was listening to some of the chapter notes which you have on your website. Hearing it with your own voice, and Melissa's voice is so powerful. It's so personable. I would say, rather than, you know, sometimes there are certain books which meant to be heard rather than read, and vice versa, right? To each on its own. But when I was hearing it, I felt the power more in your
Mm-hmm.
book. So I would highly
Yeah.
advise people, you know, if they don't feel like reading, they can hear the story. It's amazing where you have actually recited that book,
Yes,
Melissa.
it's definitely something that was a very special project because I
Yeah,
wanted to do it myself. And of course, I have an accent, but I wanted to do it I wanted to record the audible in a very clear way. So I put a lot of effort
yeah,
into that. But more importantly, I wanted the listener to feel my heart, to feel me. The book is a piece of my heart, but to add to the material my sentiment, my passion, my grief, my sense
yeah,
of absolute betrayal in the times where I discover the betrayal. That is very unique. And I hope that, the book does more than just touch people's hearts and inspire them, but that actually ignites any fire inside of them that needs to be ignited so they can transform their lives, so they can live a life of more fulfillment and more love.
yeah. On that note, Melissa, you know, I've taken a lot of your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show and you sharing some of the snippets of the book. I know you've danced around, as you rightly said, and hopefully it ignites people to read through that book uh, and start managing and working through the traumas they've had, right? And the hidden memories, and uncover those hidden memories which hold them back, or the behaviors which they display to the larger world. So thank you for your time. It's been an
Thank you
absolute
so
pleasure
much.
to
It's
have
been
you
a
on the show today.
pleasure to be here with you, and I really hope that the message resonates with the listeners, and if they find the place in their heart, if they read the book, they listen to the book, that they reach out and let me know their thoughts.